So Tucker Carlson is back after being let go from Fox News, and he's now doing his show on Twitter. And over the years, Tucker Carlson has said a lot of stuff that I've taken issue with. But nothing, and I mean nothing, to this point has riled me up like what I saw yesterday. So he does an episode on Donald Trump and the 37 charges against him. And he makes an argument that he knows is dishonest and disingenuous and incredibly weaselly. He knows he's lying with this argument he's about to make. So to sum it up for you, the point he makes is the reason why they're going after Donald Trump and he's being prosecuted and he's being persecuted is because he's anti-war. Trump just loves peace so much. And the deep state going after him, they hate peace. And so that's why they're trying to take him down. I'm going to try to contain myself. I'm going to try to relax. We're going to listen to some of the argument here, and then I'll respond to it.
A process that is designed to put Donald Trump behind bars for the rest of his life. Cable news carried every moment of it live. It's unprecedented, they told us, with what looked like shock. But they weren't shocked. They knew this was coming. Everyone who's paid attention knew it was. What just happened was always going to happen. It's been inevitable since February 16th, 2016. That's the day Donald Trump made a blood enemy of the largest and most powerful organization in human history, which would be the federal government. Despite what you may remember, it wasn't anything that Trump had said about immigration or trade with China or rapists from Mexico. Those are the stories that dominated the headlines that year. Trump's a racist, they screamed. Stop him. But inside Washington, that was just noise. None of it really rated. Identity politics doesn't mean much to permanent Washington. What matters, then and now, is foreign policy. The invasions and occupations and proxy wars. The decisions that determine which global populations will thrive and which will die. The policies that come with trillion-dollar price tags. The ones that, over time, have made the counties around D.C. the richest suburbs in the world. In Washington, that's what actually matters. And it's obvious when you look carefully. When there's a debate about anything else, for example, the debt ceiling, both sides take their assigned positions and they start yelling. But when Congress decides to start a war, no matter how foolish or counterproductive or obviously disconnected from America's core interests that war may be, when that happens, the leaders of both parties automatically jump behind it like circus clowns. And then they stay there, sometimes for decades. They defend that war relentlessly against all evidence until somebody finally rings the all-clear bell and they can begin to admit that actually, maybe it wasn't such a great idea. We meant well, but it just didn't work out. The good news is we've learned a lot of important lessons. In the end, they usually do say something like that, but only after emotions have cooled and the damning details have begun to fade from collective memory. It's an apology that's not actually an apology, much less repentance, and it's years too late to matter in any case. But until then, that's all you're getting. Until then, no dissent is allowed. That's the first rule of Washington. But somehow Trump didn't bother to follow it. He is from out of town, so maybe he didn't know it was a rule, or maybe he just didn't care. Either way, 7.5 years later, we can point to the precise moment that permanent Washington decided to send Donald Trump to prison. Here it is. It's from the Republican candidates debate in Greenville, South Carolina.
We should have never been in Iraq. We have destabilized the Middle East. They lied. They said there were weapons of mass destruction. There were none, and they knew there were none. There were no weapons of mass destruction.
All right. We should never have been in Iraq, Trump said. We destabilized the Middle East. Now, by the time Trump said that, a lot of Republican primary voters were starting to reach the same conclusion. How could they not? But it was the next line that doomed Trump to today's arrest. They lied, he said. There were no weapons of mass destruction, and they knew there were none.
Now, he goes on to make that same point in 4 or 5 different ways. The entire 13-minute and 16-second video is him reiterating that same argument in a variety of different ways. The reason why Trump is a target is because Donald Trump is anti-war, and they don't like that. Let me respond to this with receipts. There is not a single argument in the world that gets under my skin more than this one. And this one has been pervasive on social media. It's been pervasive among the commentariat. People are still under this absurdly false notion that Donald Trump was some sort of a dove. He brings up the war in Iraq here. Does Tucker Carlson say anything about the fact that Trump continued the war in Iraq? For all of his huffing and puffing, and I'm a tough guy, and I'm the big guy, and I'm going to tell you the truth about the war in Iraq. Well, then why did you continue it? You're going to give the dude credit when he didn't even end it because he made some noises with his mouth on a debate stage? Now, let me be clear. If he did end it, I would give him credit because I'm honest and I'm fair. And Tucker Carlson didn't say a goddamn word when Joseph Robinette Biden got us out of Afghanistan. I did. I gave Biden credit because he actually ended a war. He took the boots on the ground out of there. Was Tucker Carlson honest? Was he up front? Did he say, hey man, credit where credit is due? No, he didn't. But Trump just says some words and he creams himself and acts like he's an anti-war hero. If he was an anti-war hero, he would have actually gotten us out of Iraq. He did not get us out of Iraq. On Afghanistan, he made a lot of noises too. Oh, we're going to get out of there. We're going to get out of there. When he left office, we were still in there. It took Joe Biden with half his brain working to decide, I'm going to get us out of Afghanistan. And by the way, he stood up to the media in the process, which was cheerleading for us to stay in. But again, Tucker Carlson has nothing positive to say about Joe Biden and everything positive to say about Donald Trump. What about bombing Syria? Remember this? If he's so anti-war, why did Donald Trump bomb Syria? Are you going to disagree with him on that? Are you going to criticize him on that? Are you going to bring that up in this bogus, fallacious rant where you pretend like he's anti-war, even though his record says the exact opposite? Of course you're not, because you're a weasel, because you're a liar, because you're a fraud, Tucker. You know what Tucker is? I call him a narrative humper. He always comes back to the same points, regardless of what the evidence says. Remember this? Trump increased drone strikes by 432%. That doesn't sound very anti-war to me. Does it sound anti-war to you? He also, by the way, got rid of some of the reporting rules around said drone strikes. See, Obama wasn't good with drones either. But at least there were some guardrails, and they had to report, hey, here's the numbers that we have. Whoops, we killed X number of civilians, etc. Trump was like, screw all that, and quadruple the number of drone strikes, baby. Again, does that sound anti-war to you? Remember when Trump tried to coup Venezuela? They pretended like Juan Guaido, totally unelected, was now the president of Venezuela. Disregarded a democratic election to install somebody who's an authoritarian puppet to U.S. corporations. And again, you want to say he's anti-war? Remember this? Donald Trump ripped up the Iran nuclear agreement. An agreement that was working, that the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, verified over a dozen times. They didn't have nuclear weapons. They weren't building nuclear weapons. We verified that fact, and all we had to do in return was lift the sanctions and give them back their own money. Donald Trump goes in there, rips that up, puts us on a permanent war footing with them, and then goes, oh, I can't believe that now they're actually moving towards nuclear weapons. Well, they wouldn't have been if you didn't rip up the goddamn deal. Don't tell me this is a peace candidate. This is the exact opposite. He governed like a neocon. But somehow, Tucker can criticize George W. Bush for being a neocon, or Barack Obama, but not Donald Trump, even though all the facts paint a very clear picture that he is a neocon. Remember this? Donald Trump ordered a drone strike on top Iranian commander, General Soleimani, at the same time, mind you, that Soleimani was on the ground fighting ISIS. So Trump acted as the de facto air force for ISIS and a bunch of jihadists. And they have the nerve to say, he's just trying to bring us peace. There was a series of retaliations after this bombing too, where our own people who are stationed in the Middle East got fired on. He reversed Obama's normalization with Cuba in an attempt to say, hey man, the Cold War is over. Sorry about all those bad feelings when we tried to overthrow your ass a number of times. Let's get back to a normal diplomatic situation between the United States and Cuba. He went in there and reversed that. He went in there and sanctioned them again. He signed a pro-torture executive order. One of the biggest failures and egregious crimes of the neocons like George W. Bush's Dick Cheney is that they pseudo-legalized torture in this country. That's one of the biggest contributions of these neocons that Tucker hates so much. Well, Trump got in there and he said, yummy in my tummy. Let's bring back torture. Very peaceful, but it's peaceful torture when it's Donald Trump, right? Is that what it is, Tucker Carlson? Is it peaceful torture? Trump asks advisors for battle plans to attack Mexico. This just happened. This just happened in late March. This is only a few months ago. Trump's out there talking about, yeah, maybe we should invade Mexico because of drug cartels and whatnot. I've never heard of anything less peaceful. Not only is this pro-war, this is as pro-war as you can get. You're going to invade one of our top allies right on our border over drug cartels. We've already waged a war on drugs. How'd that work out? Prohibition was a war on alcohol. How'd that work out? Turned out the real solution was to legalize, tax, and regulate and put the mafia out of business with prohibition. And in this case, it would put the drug cartels out of business if you legalized, taxed, and regulated across this entire country. They don't want to do that. They would rather invade Mexico with fighter jets and drones and who knows, maybe potentially boots on the ground. You know, the anti-war position. This one right here is one of the worst ones. Trump vetoed a measure to end U.S. support for a Saudi Arabian genocide in Yemen. We've talked about this, man. Tens of thousands of innocent civilians have been massacred by the Saudi government. Why? There was a Sunni government in Yemen. They were overthrown by the Shia Houthis, but the Sunni government was allied with the Sunnis in Saudi Arabia. So they decided, we're not going to let this stand. And they took a bunch of our weapons and said, let's start indiscriminately bombing. They bombed mosques. They bombed hospitals. They bombed open-air markets. They bombed every single thing in sight. They blockaded the country. They starved the country. Women and children and babies were dying, and we knew about it the whole time. And you know what Donald Trump did? He kept sending them billions of dollars worth of weapons. And you know what else he did? When the Senate said, you know what, we're going to put an end to this because this isn't right. We're aiding a genocide. We're aiding the massacre of civilians. What did Trump do? He vetoed that. Anti-war, my ass cheeks. Anti-war. This is one more people need to know about. An 8-year-old American girl who's Anwar al-Awlaki's daughter, Nawar, an 8-year-old American girl, was killed in Donald Trump's very first approved raid as president. This is a mission that was so risky that even Obama, who was no dove in his own respect, he looked at it and he said, I can't approve that, man. I can't do it. I can't do it. What did Trump do? Green light. And now this girl, this little girl, is dead. I have no problem with honest arguments made for positions where somebody just happens to disagree with me. That's the beauty of political discourse and dialogue and debate. But when you take a position that I know you're smart enough to know is total horseshit, and you still push it at the top of your lungs, oh, hell no. Hell no, nobody should stand for that. Not a single person should stand for that. He gets all this credit, anti-war, anti-war. He hired the neocons that you admit you despise, Tucker. Mike Pompeo, neocon, bragged about lying and cheating and stealing as the head of the CIA and was proud of it. Hired John Bolton, the war criminal's war criminal, The guy who got us into Iraq first and foremost. That was Trump's right-hand man for his foreign policy for a significant amount of time during his administration. Gina Haspel, who did torture. These are all people that he surrounded himself with. You want to know why? Because he wanted to. Because he chose to. Because he's a grown-ass man who has agency, and he actually kind of agreed with them. The final point I'll make in this ridiculous conversation that we shouldn't even be having as to whether or not Donald Trump is anti-war. The final point. The argument is he's being persecuted. He's being persecuted simply because he's anti-war. That's why the deep state is going after him. Well, Tucker, how do you explain other people in Washington who are, beyond any doubt whatsoever, way more anti-war and have not been arrested? Nobody doubts that Bernie Sanders is more anti-war than Donald Trump. Nobody. Literally nobody. Has he been arrested? You don't like that example? I'll give you another one. What about Ron Paul? He's a libertarian. I disagree with him completely on economic issues, but I agree with him a lot on foreign policy issues. He is principally anti-war. He's a deep non-interventionist. Did the deep state arrest him? He was a senator who was anti-war and always voted in accordance with that. Did they arrest him? What about Rand Paul? He's in the Senate right now. He's more anti-war than Donald Trump, and it's not even close. Did they arrest him? I got one more for you. Joe Biden. For all of his flaws, he's certainly not perfect. He's certainly some semblance of a hawk, as evidenced by the fact that he voted for the Iraq War initially, and we still have many military bases around the world, etc. But there is no doubt Joe Biden is more anti-war than Donald Trump. That's not debatable. That's not debatable. He pulled us out of Afghanistan. Boots on the ground are out of Afghanistan. Trump didn't do that. Biden did that. And he stood up to the media in the process. But beyond that, what else did he do? He nearly eliminated the drone war. He massively reduced the drone war. Less drone strikes than Obama, way less drone strikes than Donald Trump. You very rarely, if ever, hear stories about drone strikes now. He made a choice to cut back on it. They didn't arrest him. They didn't arrest him. And he's more anti-war than Donald Trump. So Tucker, do yourself a big favor. Stop being a lazy hack. Because this argument, man, I'm sorry, but when you don't have all the bells and whistles of Fox News, you don't have the high production value, you don't have the big name associated with the prime time slot, this ain't landing, dude. It's just sad, and it's embarrassing, and it's pathetic, and it's counterfactual, and nobody should believe a goddamn word of it. And you know what? I think we're at the point where most people don't believe it. Most people don't believe that. All it takes is a simple Google search to learn just how bogus the notion is that Donald Trump is anti-war. And even when people bring up, say, Ukraine and Russia, well, he's more anti-war because he doesn't want to support Ukraine as much. Go look at his record as president. Go look at it. He gave them weapons. And he bragged about giving them weapons. And he went after Obama because Obama, he said, didn't give him weapons and didn't give him anywhere near enough support. He did a NATO buildup on Russia's border. So even if you bring up that example, not true. Nowhere near true. So I'm done with the narrative humpers, man. If you have a narrative and you stick to it despite all of the evidence and all of the facts, you are nothing but a fraud. You are nothing but a hack. You are nothing but a pathetic loser. And everybody needs to see through it when it's Tucker Carlson, because I've never seen a lower, more pathetic, more incorrect argument than what he just laid out there, and he knows that's true. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.